Hello and welcome to Inside the Avatar Studio. Inside the Avatar Studio brings together innovative leaders from the virtual technology frontier to discuss their perceptions, perspectives, and predictions of what being virtual means in today's society. With us today, we have Tim Gorree, aka Digistar. You have to forgive me. I'm doing really well with Second Life names. Brouwer. Hopefully I got that right. Digistar Brouwer, and he's been with Nokia since 1999 in various professional positions. Previously, he was a communications officer for Nokia Online Services, and he's the one that's been responsible for bringing Nokia into Second Life during the second half of 2006. Tim is the chief evangelist for Virtual Worlds Enterprises within Nokia and has been ever since. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Feenan, and you said that right. It is Brouwer indeed. It's a
Brouwer.
Dutch word for beer brewer. Actually, I thought it was fun.
Oh, excellent. It's interesting living up here in Canada because we get all these French names and I can't do them well either. So I do very well if I can get names right every once in a while. I'm actually going to put you a little bit on the spot in today's show because, as you know, I mean we've had a chance to talk in the past, and I've got an old telecommunications background with regards to mobile, having worked with Bell Mobility Cellular way back when in the earlier days of the cellular telephone industry. So anything to do with Nokia is very near and dear to my heart because, I mean, it's just been interesting watching the changes that have happened there, and then to watch what you guys have been doing inside Second Life has been really interesting. And one of the things that I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about the mobile industry itself, because to me it seems that we're going down this particular path where there is where 3D is going, and then there's where mobile is going. And it seems to be very, very different in terms of the paths that these things are going, and yet both of these are considered to be disruptive technologies to a certain extent. They're the foundation from which new ideas are springing and new business opportunities. And so instead of focusing on virtual worlds for a little bit, I actually want to focus on the mobile market. And specifically, I want to look at a couple of the pieces of information that come from the Nokia website, where they're talking about 46% of people currently in the world don't own cell phones, and that of those who do, only about 14% use them for internet on the phone compared to 17% that use them for SMS. And even within that, a lot of the people that do have smartphones, not the 80% or so, are using the web-enabled features, but there's still a fairly large percentage of folks that are not. And I guess one of the things that I want to get from your perspective is, I guess where I'm sort of looking at is that I see some sort of parallels between what's happening in the mobile market and what's happening inside the virtual world arena, where we have lots of different people that come in here, but not everybody's using all the various capabilities that Second Life and OpenSim and these other environments have to offer. And so I want to get a little bit of your insight into where you sort of see some of the opportunities for mobile, and then subsequent to that, how you sort of see that connecting with virtual 3D environments.
Wow, what an interesting question. Where to start, really? I think that you're right when you say that internet and mobile are very much converging, and they're really both just technology, aren't they? They both are kind of pervasive technology in our lives, whether it is when you sit in front of a big screen and a PC, or when you're on the move and you have a mobile in your hand. You're looking at internet technology, you're looking at mobile technology, and these converge. And the result of that is quite a high impact on society today. Already, I think, recently transforming the music industry, transforming the advertisement industry, transforming other industries. And I think it's fair to look at what industry is next. And I think that's where virtual worlds might play a big role in what I think it's fair to call a commoditization of animation technologies. Whether it's computer games or Disney movies, these were technologies that were 20 years ago only available to people in expensive creative studios, and nowadays they're available to absolutely everybody. And how that relates to what we're looking at and the numbers that you mentioned about a lot of people not having access and not being connected, I think that's where we see the huge gap between the ultra connected and the almost not connected. And I think that's where Nokia has an important role to play, living up to its slogan called connecting people. Does that answer your question?
It sort of does. It's sort of, I think, sort of opening the door, because I mean, if we look at groups like the X Prize Foundation, they've got stats coming out of their particular group that are talking about the number of mobile users, and they're only talking the 2G technology, not the 3G technology. But mobile users are going to jump from this 54% that we're at right now to about 80% by the end of 2013. And so there's this very strong market, and there's this very high acceptance rate of mobile technology. Certainly, I mean, the X Prize Foundation has a couple of different ones that are very, very much focused on this idea of reach and breadth, and yet we don't quite see the same thing happening inside the virtual arena, right? So, for example, I mean, the Second Life doesn't show up in a lot of these numbers in terms of how this particular type of platform would, I guess, sort of lead into a lot of the mobile technologies, or vice versa, where some of the mobile technologies would necessarily be leading into here. And I was wondering if you had any insight in terms of where Nokia was looking to go with some of this stuff in a longer term picture.
Well, first of all, I think that when we speak about virtual worlds, we have to look really at the entire industry. And in the beginning, I think a couple of years ago, we started counting about how many virtual worlds platforms there were actually out there. And we stopped counting at 500. And I think it's fair to say that to some degree, each and every one of them will have a certain level of influence on society and on the market. And then, it remains to be seen still what kind of result each of these platforms will bring about. But if you look at, for example, Zynga, this Cityville on Facebook, I see a lot of Second Life elements in there, actually removing boundaries and being very rewarding for certain kind of confirmation towards certain rules that you can recognize in society even. Not always that I would say that it would be a good thing, because, for example, a person learns immediately what it's like to be in debt and short of money, and having to follow different types of behaviors and rules in order to get rewarded for that. And I think if millions of people are playing those games, they will pick up and take something of that into their real lives. And I think that's really the big conversation. What we need to have is that what is the influence that we want this technology to have in our own lives, and how do we want to see that also when we are using this technology from a mobile perspective. And I think that changes a lot of things when you begin to speak about things like augmented reality and mixed mirror environments. And one of the things that I find perhaps most exciting about our announced partnership with Microsoft is that Microsoft has done a tremendous amount of work in this area, it seems. as I'm basically also just beginning to learn to see what they have been doing in this area in the past. And one of the very pleasant surprises, I would say, was that I found out that you can actually create gestures using the Microsoft Xbox Kinect for Second Life. So that means that you can basically model gestures that would be natural to you. I think that's a very good example of avatar technology moving forward and being more progressive. And the question is, of course, how do we want to make use of our avatars? Do we want to run multiple ones? All these basic key questions that relate very much to our identity and how we deal with that. And one of the benefits of Second Life, I think, is its extraordinarily advanced avatar customization methods that make a lot of good for all the password mess that all the World Wide Web internet presences have caused. So I would say that's a problem that we as Nokia would love to solve that, or help solve that, how to make things easier on that front. And then it remains to be seen really what are actually the boundaries of the technology, but also what are the boundaries that society puts on us in applying this technology to our daily life. To what extent is it a game, and to what extent is it serious? And I think it's getting pretty serious.
Well, it's kind of interesting because you touched on a few things that I had found from doing a little bit of research before coming in here, and I'm got a couple of different things that I'm just throwing up that a couple of other that some of the other folks in the audience here can see. I think it's kind of interesting, some of the contrast that you've been talking about. I mean, this idea of potentially being able to use a cell phone along with some of this stuff from Microsoft, eventually, Kinect technology potentially making its way into cell phone technology, where somebody could go to maybe a party or something and they could whatever. I mean, they could basically have their cell phone capturing what's going on, but then have that representation inside a 3D world that could connect to hundreds of people elsewhere. It's not just a matter of necessarily video, but maybe having a whole different level of connection with individuals. And yet, when we look at some of the applications that people are using their cell phones for currently, there's two things that I'm noticing coming out of a lot of the statistics that are coming out. That are coming out from Nokia's website itself, actually. One of which being that a lot of the primary usage of cell phones are for very practical everyday things, like catching up with your email, finding out what's going on with the weather, keeping up with your social networks. I mean, in terms of Facebook and a lot of short messaging service type things, doing map lookups. And with regards to a number of other activities, once you start become web enabled, you're doing things like gaming, you're doing searching, downloading music, videos, and apparently it's very, very big in Japan is in terms of using your cell phone primarily for watching TV, which is still not something that's really caught on in Europe or in North America. So, I mean, these are very common everyday things that we're very much used to, and yet it sounds as if you're going 3 or 4 steps beyond that. So I'm wondering how you sort of see a morphing of sort of the way mobile users are using their phone now, in how they're potentially going to use it with this particular type of technology. I mean, you were talking about logins and what have you. Is there a way that we're going to potentially be able to blend a lot of this stuff?
Well, actually, if you look at our location mapping technology, the NavTech maps, those will be also empowering the Bing maps. And then you see that if you look at, for example, mobile local advertising, and what would be the potential possibilities there? using immersive technology, kind of in a right mix with how can I say mapping technology. So for example, if you would visit a location and you have a mirror world of that location available on your mobile phone, you might be able to recognize all sorts of information what you otherwise wouldn't. For example, the Digistar browser, Wikitude browser, Nokia Point and Find. These are all location-based technologies that are basically betting on discovery as soon as you physically enter that space. So I think it's interesting to start thinking about what a customer experience could look like if virtual goods were an everyday aspect of our daily lives. And how would we use them and go about making them economically beneficial to society? For example, if you go to the supermarket, you might get some bonus points. And but you also it might also be the place where you buy milk every day. So if you buy a pack of milk, why not see the pack of milk appear in your virtual fridge right away? So you can basically also get access to your data that the supermarket currently collects from you. But you would probably need that data yourself also to, it would be interesting to look at. It should belong to you in the first place. And it does, and that's why you're getting currently bonus points for it. But that could be that could be virtual goods, and they could sit in your virtual home. Call me crazy, but I think that's sort of a natural thing to expect to happen.
That's actually, I had to turn the mic off for a second because I was almost about to start to laugh at one of the things that you mentioned a little bit earlier, not in a bad way, in a very good way. I can almost picture this situation where you're going into a particular type of a shopping mall, and based on location finding that not to buy into gender stereotypes at all in any way, shape, or form, but I mean anybody that's got my type of buying habits wants to just find the store, get in, get out, and just be done with it. Whereas, there's certain people that I know that they want to see every single location that's there. And, talking about a lot of this type of stuff where Google's talking about having their 3D mapping type stuff as well that's out there, where you can go and you can have a 3D representation of the store and what's there. I mean, the ability to, and we've heard about a lot of this type of stuff in terms of development type activities. It's interesting to now play around with some of these ideas. The whole concept of being able to have a 3D avatar image stored inside your mobile phone, go into a particular store and to be able to virtually try on different things and see how it looks from an external perspective.
Exactly. And also I think that it's interesting that you mentioned ideas, because there's so many great ideas out there that we get every day from, and they often get lost, so in that way, I think it's very important to capture those good ideas and also be able to work together in an open way on developing those and supporting each other in a kind of a generosity, in a way that's full of generosity, in a way. Because ideas need to be shared in order to develop. And in an environment where this does not happen, innovation suffers. So I think that ideas need to be free in that way. And we actually just recently, I don't know if you heard the news, but we actually started this website called ideasproject.com for the South by Southwest conference. But it's actually a relaunch of where several Silicon Valley leaders are presenting their ideas and guidance, offering their guidance really, and in harvesting and collecting and also putting first claims on some of the best ideas. I hear my own voice, by the way, so it's a bit difficult to keep the right tune. Does that answer your question, or?
Yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, it's I guess this is where I think it's very interesting because we look at 3D virtual collaborative spaces, and they are very different from mobile collaborative spaces. And yet, like as it stands right now, it's the mobile collaborative space that's gaining all the popularity and the popular acceptance, whereas the 3D spaces, we're still struggling with this idea of what we can do with 3D spaces. But we know there's something here. We know there's something important about virtual 3D spaces. And eventually these two ideas have to merge in terms of how we're using them. I love this site. I managed to, and I've got a sample on it behind us here, but I mean, I was taking a run through it, and there's some really interesting ideas that people are talking about on there. I mean, there's some really general ones, such as the Nokia DJ product and having your cell phone being your point of sale system. Another idea that they had on there was this idea of rapid alarms when earth changes type occur, and obviously we've seen that in the last week with what's happening in Japan right at the moment.
I think also that this is a time where companies need to learn to understand that it's actually their customers that are in the driving seat, and I think that's a big cultural change and shift of the way in which we work. And I think that that's also one thing about Nokia that I've always found is that it doesn't matter where you work as long as you do a good job.
Well, I think it's kind of interesting because I'm going to come back to this, and I've got a little slide up here about Nokia and Microsoft and some of the partnership type things that you guys are looking at. But I mean, it's really kind of interesting when you say that, because I mean, in some ways we have these large corporations which are trying to say, here it is, we know better than you do how things should be done, and yet you've got this other side of the fence where you've got portions of the corporation or other corporations or other partners in the mix that are sitting there going, no, our customers are really the one that are driving where the innovation is going, and they're the ones that are going to show us the way, so to speak. So I want to refer to two different types of items that sort of exemplify this a little bit. One is this whole concept that Microsoft brought out in terms of ribbons, right? And the way they work with the operating system. I mean, Microsoft tries very much to bury as much as the technical details go, and they don't necessarily give the audience a wide berth in terms of being able to do things that they would like to do. And it's not to say that Apple's any better, because I mean, Apple, certainly while they've got their app store and anybody can write an app, Apple is also very much an iron boot with regards to which type of applications do or don't get accepted into their particular system. So, we've got these I guess dichotomies between the large organization and then wanting to be sensitive to the local needs of the customer base. In Second Life, in virtual worlds, this has been all pretty much completely open. I mean, people have been able to do it's not quite the way I want to go about that. Essentially, people have only been limited by the technology, and there's nobody that's really been out there that has been putting their foot down and saying, no, you can't do that. I mean, we've had a couple of exceptions, but those have been mostly for political and legal reasons, and we understand what's going on with banking and the gambling situation in here. But, aside from those two really, big things that have come along, there's been no restrictions in here. No, go ahead. There's been no restrictions.
I think one thing that makes Nokia unique is that we have always been first and foremost a mobile company, whereas Microsoft and Google and also Apple, they have started on the World Wide Web to make the internet big, really internet-based companies, or software development companies like Microsoft, for example, that do software really, really good. So when you're mobile, you really need everything in your pocket right there. But when you come home, you might want to have a very smooth transfer of your activities, whatever they are. But also, when we look at the internet today, and what are the problems with that? Some of the problems there are clearly a password hell. What we have put consumers in altogether, I think, on the internet, with all the different identities on all the different websites, and remembering all the different usernames. And then when we see look at Second Life, and then people are just spending these enormous amounts of effort and time to differentiate and be in control of how they are perceived visually by others. So on the one hand, our identity online is extremely important to us. But on the other hand, on the World Wide Web, we see that it's actually somehow redundant or like meaningless almost, because people can do that anonymously. So where do we find the way? Where's the balance between having a society that actually comes up with innovative new ideas and makes them happen and work together, and how do we establish trust, and how do we establish working groups around some of these interesting ideas that we can make happen? So how does this occur if we are all visiting the same website but we can't talk with each other? So that's also, I think, something very unique with Second Life, that it allows you to be there where you are not. So I think also when you translate that to a mobile environment, then, for example, even if you are running your shop, maybe you are running it remotely with your avatar. And maybe someday that might be even a robot or some kind of futuristic ideas there come to mind. But yeah, that's actually the inspiring thing, is that really that there are so many ideas out there. So how do we go about putting them to work for the betterment of society? I think that's the big question, and I think that's where Second Life and the community in Second Life has always had a very visionary role to play, in my mind.
Right. I mean, I guess to a large extent, it's kind of interesting because there's this concept that came out of the Ideas Project, and it was one of the more interesting ones that I saw, that inside the 100 or so projects that are on there right at the moment. This idea of a social customer relationship management system, where companies start to adopt all of these little bits of technology and put them into a more organized fashion. And I guess one of the questions becomes, which aspect of what we're dealing with here is the little bit and which is the big bit? So is 3D collaborative spaces and avatars and what we're doing in here, is it a little bit or is it a big bit? Mobile technology, is it a little bit or is it a big bit? Right? The operating system, the cloud, is that going to become the big bit or is it going to be a little bit? And, in terms of how we bring this stuff together. And one of the concepts that was on there was this idea of mobile devices being the main key, or the piece that's going to leverage not necessarily all components within inside it, but more specifically those components that are specifically focused on location and time of day type activities, those things that surround where we are in the moment, not necessarily which pieces of technology we're going to draw in. And I'm just wondering your take on that idea of this concept of social customer relationship management, and where the mobile device and where virtual world sort of may fit in with that.
Wow.
It's a big question.
That's a big question. Social customer relationship management. I think we're all trying to do our bit nowadays, and it means that we all become personally accountable. and working in a very transparent way will be rewarded because it shows whether that you are accountable. And I think that's what well, if you look at one of the things what's happening internally in Nokia, then we have really tens of thousands of employees working on our kind of like an internal Twitter system, working in similar manners. And if you want to take a step back, and then actually it's fair to say that the consumers chose that was the way they wanted to communicate with each other, and then subsequently everybody else has to comply. So I think also the way that we communicate is also being dictated to a large extent by consumers, and so their role in shaping the future is very, very big, regardless of what we as companies might want differently. Perhaps, you know, it used to be traditionally companies dictated the way that consumers operated, but nowadays they have access and means to technology which is in many ways superior even to the kind of technology that's available inside the companies. And I think that Second Life is a very good example of that, of how software can really empower an individual to make bigger things happen. And I think that's where the social customer relationship comes in, that it gives more opportunity for an individual to excel. And I think that will be more and more coming inside companies as this generational shift is also happening. People retire, new employees are being hired all the time, and they take with them these skills that they have picked up from outside the company into these companies. And they will expect to be able to work in that way. And if they're not able to work that way, they might rather want to work for an employer where they can. And the result of that will be that those employers that want to dictate the way in which their employees have to communicate, they will lose out eventually anyways on the talent market. So this will be a process of some time. But I think that it's really fair to say that creative communities have a fair bit of influence on the development of markets and products, and I think that we should involve them as much as possible, and also for companies to go out there and really have meaningful conversations. As they say, any community is only as valuable as that meaningful conversations take place, meaningful discussions. And I think also from that perspective, that makes Second Life a very, very, very valuable community.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that, because I mean it's certainly one of the things that I've always sort of believed in, is that if you're not, you can't use technology to insulate yourself from your customer base. And yet, to a certain extent, this is exactly what we do see with a number of companies. This is what they're trying to do. They're trying to insulate themselves more, and I guess to a certain extent, they're almost trying to use mass demographics to reach the broadest possible market, the low-hanging fruit, as a couple of people that I used to work with used to say quite a bit. But it's interesting, this concept that you were talking about, because it fits in with this idea of social customer relationship management, is that, you know, the employees having the ability to adapt to new technologies without necessarily the need for organizational approval. I mean, this idea that the marketplace really will eventually drive the applications and the way in which we use them, rather than the other way around.
Well, one very good example is if you look at what we have been doing in Africa, for example, that's in some of the most remote villages that you can find there, you will find a Nokia shop. And we started to find out at some point that people were using the SMS mechanism provided there to pay each other. It was born out of necessity. And that turned into Nokia Money. So that's now being used in India, for example. Some very interesting results there, where basically you have a virtual currency that people can use in very remote towns and villages, and yeah, and that's one example of how virtual world technology can have an effect on the other side of the world.
Different things that we're doing in here. I find this really sort of fascinating to a large extent, because I mean, it's, you know, a lot of the questions that we're talking about, a little bit of the technology and how it sort of interrelates, and I guess it is a struggle to try to sort of compare these two, because they are vastly different types of technology. But this whole concept of being virtual itself is, I think, very similar to both of them. And I guess really I've been asking a lot of those questions so that we can sort of get to the next couple that I really want to have a chance to ask, which is, you know, where do you see the current 3D virtual collaborative environments that we're dealing with here? How do you see those sort of influencing the way in which mobile applications will develop? And I know we've sort of talked at this from a technology standpoint, but I guess I'm sort of interested in it more from a social development standpoint. You know, the places where we really see things that we've done in here sort of stand out inside the real world.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it has to do, it's going to have something to do with really smart, functional avatar functionality. I think the avatar has to come to mobile. Mirror worlds are what all the focus has been on. But I think the avatar might be able to solve some very key problems there for the consumer. And I think also what you see, for example, about trust and online payment. I think that a lot of people are very aware of the fact that the current credit card system is, not 100% safe. There's a risk of fraud, and how are we going to deal with that security if we want to grow our dependency on electronic payment, at the pace that it's currently growing at? And if you look at the numbers earlier, like a lot of people don't even have access to a mobile phone, then I think that that's where we are really doing a lot of the groundwork of connecting the unconnected, and where we look at the virtual world and the avatar. I think that that's really where there is all the innovation taking place, and it is sort of the holy grail of how to make it into a exciting, engaging, and fun and rewarding for everybody involved ecosystem. This beautiful picture here behind me up on the wall with social and all the other icons there, entertainment, developers, advertising, consumers, shops. So everybody has a part to play in there. So I think it's very, very difficult to orchestrate that. But I think that it has to come from consumer choice. It will be determined what's going to work and what's not. So the companies that are going to be listening best to their consumers are going to be the companies that are going to win, I think. So does that make sense? And I think, when it comes to the virtual, I think that there is where some of the smartest consumers actually are. The most critical ones, the most expressive ones, people who are could be considered as influencers of public opinion in many ways.
Well, I guess it's interesting because I mean, it was something that I actually hadn't thought of before until you started talking about it. This idea that, because if you look at where people are actually using mobiles right now, I mean, it's in gaming, it's in mapping technology, it's in this particular type of stuff. The idea of bringing the avatar to mobile is, I guess, really a little bit. I mean, it seems quite obvious when you start talking about it, but it's not necessarily the most obvious thing when you're sitting back and saying, okay, what's the next big idea that really needs to come to mobile at some point? And the ways in which that the avatar could potentially be used. I want to throw another slightly different idea of an avatar at you and just get a little bit of your feedback from this. There's been conversations that we've had with other people, and both on this show and in other forums, where there seems to be this difference in mindset between, and I hate to use this, I really do, between older generation type people who look at avatars in terms of a virtual embodiment, similar to how we are here in Second Life, and the way in which the 20-somethings currently are sort of envisioning an avatar, which is not so much a physical representation, but is more of literally a virtual wrapper that sort of goes around themselves. So their Facebook profile is their virtual identity. It's not some avatar that they create. It's the profile. It's the brand. It's the way that they put themselves out there.
What I find most interesting about Facebook, that over a dozen years of heavy investment and research into user interaction, and finally coming up with the best that we can do was sort of the golden triangle in the left upper corner. Then put virtual worlds next to that, and put the topic of interaction design on the table. And then all of a sudden, if you look around you and you start to realize that the real 3D internet is actually the world around us. And the technology that we're using as virtual technology, that's the technology that should be helping us in interacting with the 3D internet, the world around us. And currently there seems to be this collective sort of a cloud-based, cloudy thinking, I would say almost, that virtual technology is all about games. But it's actually, I think it's bound to be persuasive technology that is going to be part of our everyday life.
So the way in which it will influence, not necessarily how it distracts.
I mean, how?
Well, for example, I mean, when one of the things that we were looking in the mobile industry was this idea that, you know, the top 5 things, the top 5 activities that people do with their mobile phone are to a certain extent all distractions. I mean, they're games, searching, downloading videos, their music, their television. And while all of these mediums can educate, they don't necessarily enable, and I realize this is going to come out worse than it seems. They don't necessarily enable real work. Where it sounds like what you're saying is that really what we need to get to is we need to get to a point where we're allowing these things to influence what we do in the real space.
Well, take telepresence, for example. And by the way, also something about Google Earth I saw coming by in chat. I actually believe Google Earth, actually Google Street View, part of that, was partly co-developed and first here in Second Life. Because we had a Nokia holodeck, and I saw them here, and I believe that Google Street View came about when a lot of panorama photographers started to come together to exchange their best stitching methods. And actually, this collaboration allowed them to perfect the technique, and that allowed the creation of products like Google Street View. And what is interesting about that is that that technology focuses only on the environment and completely drop the concept of actual telepresence, because I think what makes tonight special is that I have a feeling that I can meet you virtually because I have something to look at. Call it a really modern telephone call, but I think seeing the other person is going to be a strong, it's very important for the communication to make a successful communication cycle happen. And I think the problem with the video phone calls there is that nobody likes it. And that's where, for example, FaceTime from Apple, and we had video phone calls already 10 years ago working on the Nokia, but nobody seems to like it. So, but then when you are in the virtual world, you're actually the one in control of your identity. You are the one who can determine how the other person perceives you. And I think that's a very important and very powerful argument to say that, I wish that I could also take my virtual identity that I have spent so much time on crafting also to the mobile and help me or be with me while I'm on the go.
Well, I certainly know nobody wants to see my unshaven mug in my pajamas sitting here having this conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, it's interesting because I mean so I guess to a large extent then because it's interesting this balance between having a it's I almost want to call it a brute force type approach to an avatar versus something that's a little bit more ethereal that is out there. There's always that dichotomy between what we're finding whenever we use that lens to look at the idea of being virtual. And it's interesting to get people's feedback in terms of which side of that fence they like to be on, because it really does pose some interesting dilemmas. And I would imagine, especially for Nokia in a business sense, depending on which lens you tend to use, it can stimulate different ideas in different directions. I guess speaking of different directions, though, what about the opposite direction? I mean, what are some of the things that you've seen inside the mobile world that we really should be taking back into this one, into the virtual space?
Oh, that's also an interesting question. I think it would be very interesting to see for us back in virtual worlds how we ourselves behave when we are, for example, visiting a public space, or how do we move about? What are the interactions that we have? How would you, if you look at our mapping technology, we actually have, with Navtech development program, there are programs for 3D, utilizing 3D development there. And as you can see also with, for example, Zynga's products, that you can do a lot of things with very few pixels to become engaging and at least have the idea of an avatar on the mobile. So mobile games, for example, games for on your mobile phone, the success of Angry Birds, for example, I think it's a very interesting phenomena. There was just very cute and fuzzy characters, really, that are the reason for the success of the game, I believe. Very smart characters. So there's definitely an appetite in the market for avatars on the mobile phone, without a doubt. The question is, what's going to be the best and the most engaging and most fascinating way of implementing them and using them so that it becomes part of a bigger thing, the next wave of internet innovation, perhaps. And I think that's where it should go.
But sorry, and I'm just I always love talking with people like yourself, because it always starts to stimulate all kinds of new ideas in terms of the way I start looking and thinking about things. It's the whole thing. You look at Crazy Birds, you look at some of these other apps that you can get for Nokia and Android and iPhones and all these different things. There's a lot of apps that are out there, which, and again, I'm going to go back to this idea, they're not disruptive technologies, they're distracting technologies, because they put a smile on somebody's face for a period of time, and sometimes that's just, I don't believe I'm about to use this word, sometimes it's just peachy that we can go and we can do these particular types of things because it's what's needed at a particular point in time. But there's also a very short-term view to some of these things. They become the fad of the day, compared to earlier when you were talking about this idea that whether we're talking mobile or whether we're talking 3D or whether we're talking 2D internet, the objective is really to influence this virtual environment that we have around us called the real world. How much focus do you really think needs to be placed in where we are between short-term, mid-term, and long-term objectives and with regards to a lot of these applications? The technology just seems to go by so quickly that it almost seems to be a challenge to do anything more than looking at a mid-term objective. And I'm wondering what your feeling is on that.
Oh, my favorite midterm objective is getting a mobile client for Second Life. How come there is none? It's amazing, isn't it?
Mm.
How come we haven't seen it yet? That's the thing that surprises me most, really. And if you're going to make a mobile client, and it's too heavy to run, use the avatar only, if you can. And then use the camera view on your mobile phone to start doing some interesting things. I think that Wikitude has shown the way with augmented reality, turning the world around us into a 3D internet. And I think that all the hallmark signs are there, that we just have to find a practical purpose for this technology and apply it in such a way that it becomes beneficial for people to use it for practical purposes. So as long as we do not succeed in actually delivering real value to everyday users, besides hardcore virtual world fans, we will remain just that, a niche. So when is the time when virtual world technology would go mainstream? I think the answer to that is when it becomes beneficial to apply the technology. And at this moment, it's really in training and adaptation and learning and enabling the sharing of ideas. Having ad hoc telepresence meetings, but I think that there is a far greater path for this very powerful technology ahead of itself when we start to realize that the world around us is also connected to the internet. And there are a lot of people out there that are currently having a digital life, but might not have so much of a real life socially, for example. So at which point are those two going to come together in the future? I think at some point. That's my estimation. What do you think?
Oh my goodness. I don't know. I'm looking at a lot of different technologies that are coming out in the marketplace, and I've been on record as having said this before, and it's to the point where it's almost like a broken record at this point. There's a lot of bits and pieces out there that I think are just waiting for somebody to come and put them together. And I mean, we've got it. There was a video that I saw the other day on something that's being done at the University of Japan, where they're working with ultrasound waves in order to give 3D holographic images a sense of physical interaction, where you'll be able to actually interact with a holograph. And it's interesting, the setup that they have, and it's fairly large. I mean, this is, you're talking like almost the size of a chair, what they've got here. They've got the projection unit, and they can create an object in 3D. And then through sound waves, it can recognize where it is that you're touching within inside that 3D space, and then it can move the 3D object. And it's very primitive, but I'll tell you something, that would be kind of cool to be able to have a mobile phone that can represent a holograph that you can physically interact with. And the scary thing is that because they can do it in large scale, at some point in the next 10 years, that's going to be miniaturized.
Yeah. I see what you mean there, yeah.
Right?
Did you try the Kinect?
I haven't, not yet. I keep playing around with the idea of buying an Xbox, and then I'm wondering whether I will have any life left if I get another toy. So
Yeah, same here actually. But yeah, I've read about it. I've been looking at it, but I haven't actually tried one. And although I am considering buying one because in theory it looks like real total immersion in that way. Total immersion, and of course I'm interested in those gestures, that mechanism of creating the gestures for Second Life. And if anybody has heard of any practical examples of doing so, I'd be loving to hear from them. Because yeah, I'd be interested in how that process goes, and if that's working well, and if it delivers any benefits for in here.
I will have to check with Kayvon, because for the life of me I cannot remember who it is that's doing it. But one of the presenters we're having this weekend at the Virtual World's Best Practice in Education Conference is actually going to be showing the how they've used Kinect to hook up to Second Life. And apparently we are going to have one not necessarily a demonstration, but they're going to provide a video in terms of what they've done, and they're going to talk about it a little bit. So it should be kind of interesting. But as it stands right now, if we were to combine some of the technologies we have now, then you've got your 3D navigator with your 5 Wii remotes strapped to your arms and your head, and then looking at your Kinect box all hooked up to Second Life. You're starting to look more like Borg than anything else right now.
Let me give you an example, Feenan, of how I actually got to be involved with avatars in the first place. It actually goes back to 2002. When I was having a coffee at the office, and a colleague came to me, and he asked me this question of whether we could make a face appear on the mobile screen. And this was very early days. We were just, I think, about a year before the first camera phone, the 7650, came out. We were used to those green screens, and I'd been working for Photoshop with Photoshop at that point for like a dozen years or so. So I thought that, yeah, if we do it this way, it should be possible. 3 weeks later, he came back with a pile of paper, and he had taken my advice of how to do it, and he entered us into this contest called Nokia Venture Challenge, and we then won it and got an award to create this mobile application back in 2002 called Virtual Characters for the mobile. So it's an example of having a brief conversation, having a small idea, and somebody picking that up and starting to run with it and making it happen. And I think that's sort of like what the ideasproject.com is trying to capture and make possible. And I think that when you see that the more people come together from different backgrounds and different providing different views, the more creative ideas will come to life. And I think that with Kinect, I think Microsoft did an amazing job of putting a very important part of the puzzle together.
So are we going to? I have to ask the question: Are we going to see Nokia phones now having Kinect embedded into them?
I wish I knew. I would. I wish I knew. I can tell you I hope for it, but I don't know anything else. So.
Yeah, it should be. It'd be interesting to see some of the differences in how this particular type of association will work, because Apple and Microsoft are two vastly different companies, and Apple's obviously got their way of dealing with the public and the way of dealing with their technologies, and Microsoft has a very different approach to it. And then you've got the Googles and the Linuxes of the world and what have you.
Yeah, if there's anything to say about the Nokia customers, it's that they are really everywhere, and they are all over the world. One of the most global audiences I think you can find on the planet. Yeah.
I'm just trying to think, because I think, I hate to say, I think we've actually hit most of my main questions here, but I really want to ask this question. I know it's not quite related to virtual worlds, but is there anything coming up with regards to this collaboration between Nokia and Microsoft that we should be really looking forward to over the next little while? because in some ways this is a very interesting thing. In other ways, it sort of scares the heck out of me, because I know Microsoft has this whole thing where you have to be a Microsoft certified professional to do just about anything with Microsoft, and yet, Nokia's got this very open approach to the way applications are developed, similar to the way Apple, not the same, but similar to the way Apple does things. So, I'm wondering what some of the things are that are coming up that we could be looking forward to.
Yeah, again, a good question. I'm in real life an IT solution architect, so I work in IT. I think the biggest thing is really the fact that there is such a phone coming in the first place. I couldn't have guessed it last year in my wildest dream that such a thing would ever happen. And now that it has been announced, we have to make it happen. And I think that both Microsoft and Nokia are going to do their very best to make it work. So I think that's going to be very interesting, looking forward to what's going to come out of that. And I have actually a great deal of confidence in the success of that. But then again, it remains to be seen, and the market decides. So we're up for the challenge, and I think that's the main message, I think.
Right. Well, excellent. Well, Tim, it's been great having you on here. There's a whole pile of stuff I want to talk to you about a little bit later on, which is nothing to do with this, but I mean, it's certainly the, it's such a huge topic to try to really get to, and especially when you start looking at the differences in technology. I mean, it's very hard to bring these things together. And I think the last question that I sort of want to ask you before we deal with here is, what are your predictions for the next 5 years, like 5-10 years out? Where do you see us being at that particular point? Us
meaning?
Well, I mean, just in general, from a concept of being virtual, where we've talked about different pieces of technology and what have you, but if you were going to make a prediction of where we're going to be 5 years from now, where will we be?
Okay, I think after the internet and mobile have transformed music and advertisement and all the other industries as well, I think TV is next. I think that it's going to change, have to change. It's going to go mobile. Also, the advertisement, as we know it, these commercial breaks, I think we can expect to see them, when you walk through a shopping street and you're near this particular shop, you might be offered, if you want to download the latest advertisement from that shop right on your mobile with MMS, which is already growing at an amazing rate. And that number was not on your slide earlier, but that is already the technical possibility and being used by millions of people already today, this MMS messaging. So yeah, also that, I suppose, is technology waiting to get involved in enhancing the homogeneity of the whole mix of technology that we are interacting with today. If you think about it, we consider ourselves very smart human beings, but we're still pressing thousands of buttons every day just to keep our lives going. So that doesn't sound very smart at all.
Well, hopefully we'll live through it.
I think there is lots of room for innovation. Also, speech input, I think that's very interesting. Google is doing also very interesting things there, and I think that can be also very beneficial. I think the big question is how can we make the technology work for us and make sure that we are not the ones working for the technology? So let the technology do the work,
Yeah. Excellent. Great. Well, Tim, thank you very much for being on Inside the Avatar Studio. And I'd like to give a special thank you to Bevan Whitfield, who has helped produce the show for tonight, and to both Mel Burns and Robert Hacks. Hopefully I pronounced that one right. I apologize if I didn't. On Metaverse TV, NBC, and Bevan for president. There we go.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.